Excellent, excellent. Welcome, everyone. As I watch the little numbers come from the Zoom waiting room into the session room, I'm glad to have all of you here tonight. You can start using the chat if you feel so compelled, perhaps to share short crime fiction that you've loved, a story that you've loved. I know people sometimes share where they are as well, but I like to share reading suggestions, or rather, I selfishly like it when other people share reading suggestions. So if you guys want to, that's there for you. Also, if someone just wants to write something in the chat so I can make sure the chat is functioning, that would be fantastic as well. Yes. All right, Michael. Well, Michael, thank you, Michael. Michael has opened the chat. Let's hope that everyone else is able to join as well. Excellent. Thank you all. Thank you
Somebody had to
uh,
be first.
for making my nervous heart start to beat again. Excellent. All right. Um, so throughout the chat, feel free to share reading suggestions. Also, we welcome your questions throughout the conversation in the Q&A box, of which there should be one, or in the chat if the Q&A box does not appear on the screen. And we'll get going. So I'm going to do some introductions first, and then we'll start the session. And thank you everyone for seeing you in the chat. So I'm Katie Freeman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to MWA University 2025. If you haven't had a chance to join past MWAU presentations and conversations, you can find links to those sessions at the website under the Education tab, and I'll share that as well. Today, we'll be talking about how to achieve success writing short crime fiction with our excellent panelists and moderator. They will share tips, tricks, and techniques for crafting memorable short crime fiction, finding and submitting your stories, and what it looks like to sustain a successful writing career writing short crime fiction, among other things. And I'll start by introducing our moderator and panelists. Moderator Michael Bracken is an Edgar and Shamus-award nominee and three-time Derringer Award winner. Author of more than 1,300 short stories, his crime fiction has appeared in the Best American Mystery Stories, the Best Mystery Stories of the Year, and many other publications. Additionally, Bracken is the editor of Black Cat Mystery Magazine and 36 anthologies, including the Anthony Award nominated The Eyes of Texas, with Barb Goffman, the Derringer-winning and Anthony-nominated Murder, Neat, and with Stacy Woodson, the Anthony-nominated Scattered, Smothered, Covered, and Chunked, which sounds amazing. He is a recipient of the Short Mystery Fiction Society's Golden Derringer for Lifetime Achievement, and in 2024 was inducted into the Texas Institute of Letters for his contributions to Texas literature. So thank you, Michael, for moderating tonight. And for our panelists, Ashley Ruth Benier's work has appeared in Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, Black Cat Weekly, Stone's Throw, Smoking Pen Press, Malice Domestic's Mystery Most Devious and Mystery Most Humorous. Also fantastic. I love reading these titles. The Best American Mystery and Suspense 2023, and other anthologies. Originally from St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, Ashley writes mysteries highlighting the vibrant culture of her home. She is the 2023 SMFS Derringer finalist, a 2023 and 2024 Killer Nashville Claymore finalist, and one of the 2024 recipients of MWA's Barbara Neely Grant for Black Mystery Writers. Her first novel-length work is forthcoming from Crooked Lane Books in spring 2026, so you should keep your eye out for the pre-order button, and everyone should pre-order. She currently lives with her family and teaches first grade in North Carolina. Erica Krause is the author of 4 books of fiction and nonfiction, including her new collection of short stories, Save Me, Stranger. Her memoir, Tell Me Everything, The Story of a Private Investigator, is a winner of the Edgar Award for Best Fact Crime, the Colorado Book Award, and the Houstonic Book Award, which I hope I just pronounced correctly. Erica's short fiction has appeared in The New Yorker and The Atlantic and is forthcoming in Best American Mystery and Suspense and Best Mystery Stories of the Year, and won the 2025 Edgar Award for Best Short Story, which you can find on the Edgar website, which I will share as well. Erica mentors for the book project and the portfolio year at Lighthouse Writers Workshop, which is a fantastic organization, where she won the Beacon Award for Teaching Excellence. And finally, we have Art Taylor, who is the Edgar Award-winning author of 2 collections, The Adventures of the Castle Thief and Other Expeditions and Indiscretions, and The Boy Detective and the Summer of '74 and Other Tales of Suspense. His debut book, On the Road with Del and Louise, A Novel in Stories, won the Agatha Award for Best First Novel. His short fiction has also won the Agatha, Anthony, Derringer, and McCavity Awards, and he was the 2025 recipient of the Short Mystery Fiction Society's Golden Derringer for Lifetime Achievement. He is a professor of English at George Mason University. So I will drop many of these different things in the chat and also everyone's website so you can check out all of their work. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michael and again invite everyone to ask questions throughout the conversation. And I can't think of, better suited panelists and a moderator to have this conversation. So Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Katie. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We've got some great writers here. And we're going to try to avoid all the cliche questions like, what's a short story? Are you a plotter or a penciler? That's been covered at every panel in every convention you've ever been to. So we're going to start by talking about the particular skill sets it takes to write a short story. And our panelists have all established themselves as masters in this form. But crime fiction encompasses a wide range of subgenres, from cozy cat mysteries to hard-boiled noir, to Private Eyes Walking the Mean Streets. So I'd like everybody to answer, but I'm going to start with Ashley. Do you concentrate on a particular subgenre or a couple of subgenres, or do you write across all the subgenres?
Oh my gosh, I wish I had the kind of talent to write across all subgenres, but no. So one thing I did when I started writing short mystery fiction was I read a whole lot of it. And then talking to a lot of the other authors who had been at this for a while, it helped me to understand, what a vast spectrum this is. And that helped me figure out where I felt most comfortable. So I don't write cat mysteries, although that would be a lot of fun. But my stories tend to be on the lighter side. They're usually mysteries. They usually have an amateur sleuth who's trying to figure something out. And they all have the Caribbean. So for me, writing stories that incorporate some element of Black joy or Black excellence was important. So my mind kind of naturally gravitates to writing stories that have like a resolution or like a more hopeful ending. And so that lends itself more towards like the cozier side of things. But I have to say that I've gotten a lot of great opportunities, some of them from you, to try different subgenres. A PI story, a car thief story. Thank you so much, Michael. And I really enjoyed that challenge. And I found that I could really incorporate a lot of the things that I loved or that I felt naturally drawn to, like strong female leads and Black joy and the Caribbean. I could still incorporate those into different subgenres without losing that spark. So yeah, it's fun to stick to what you're good at, but it's also great to try new things.
Erica, related to that, I noticed several of your short stories have appeared in literary magazines. Do you have a natural bent in that direction, or are you just lucky enough to sell to those markets, but you're writing straight ahead mysteries?
I think there's always luck, always, whenever you publish anything. I never, it's funny when people call me a crime writer, because I'm like, I never intentionally try to do anything in particular with regard to genre. I'm always like, well, this is a weird story, and what if someone shot someone? what if there was a ghost? It's always, the genre seems to come from those what if questions for me. So I don't tend to focus on genre until way later, until the story's done, and then I'm like, who might like this weird thing I made, right? So that for me is genre. But I as far as like where it should go, I also feel like I'm not very I'm not a mind reader, so I don't really know. So I just send to a lot of places and see if anyone is weird enough to like my weird, and then it goes where it goes. So but one thing I've noticed recently is that a lot of literary magazines are very sick of the story of someone looking out a window, or it's a story where there's no plot. And one thing about crime stories is they really deliver on plot. So these, like what you think of as a literary magazine, they are eager sometimes to read. I think they're just really sick of the story where nothing happens, which is what literary means to a lot of people. And they snap up these mystery stories and crime stories and stories with suspense, because they're kind of thirsty for it. So that's just been my experience, though. I'm eager to hear what you guys have experienced too, with regard to like where you send things.
Well, what about you, Art? Do you stick to a particular subgenre or try to write across the subgenres?
Well, a few years ago, Ed Amar, who's also a terrific short story writer, asked me a question, and it sort of opened my eyes to this. He said, Art, you write lighter stories here, and you write noir stories here, and dark there. He said, "Has that ever been a problem with you in terms of establishing a brand?" And I was like, well, I hadn't thought about that, but yes, I guess so. But the thing is that I have always read so widely, both in the mystery genre and, Erica, as you're saying, across literary and genre boundaries, and have enjoyed so many things. And I find myself sort of writing whatever comes to mind, wherever an idea might take me. If it is, I've not written a cat mystery before, but if it is a lighter mystery, I go there. And sometimes it is a little darker where I lean. And just recently, I was invited for a Burt Bacharach anthology to write on The Look of Love, which first appeared in the film Casino Royale. So suddenly I'm writing a spy story, which I'd never done before. But I think that's one of the good things about short fiction. And I'm thinking about somebody in my writing group, Donna Andrews, who does write traditional mysteries. And yet when she writes short stories, she feels a little bit of liberation. I can break out of this brand, to come back to that idea, and try something new. So short fiction, I think, does give you that opportunity, particularly when there are so many anthologies here and different magazines there that have a different feel to them, and you can maybe enter into each one and try different things out. Same thing, I love to read across genres. I do love to write across them as well.
But as a short story writer, I'll start with Art since he brought it up. Do you really think of brand as something? As a short story writer, I just think of myself as a short story writer,
Sure.
not as any particular kind. Do any of you think about branding when you're writing short stories?
So I do.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Art, because Michael was asking you. So
That's
I'm sorry.
fine.
Did you have some?
No, go ahead. You're good.
Oh, no, but I do. Because I started thinking after I published like the first 2 or 3 short stories that there were things that I wanted people to take away when they read one of my stories. Like I wanted them to get a feeling of the island. I wanted them to get a feeling of, very strong relationships between characters, very character-driven stories, and some kind of tie-in with like theme and connection. And I wanted people to take that away from the stories. And so and the joy, that like some kind of element of joy, like somewhere in the story, even if it's dark, even if it's, a rougher story, I wanted the main character to have at least one joyful moment somewhere in that story. And so I try to do that across all of the stories that I write, because I don't want to lose that little spark. But I think about it no matter whether I'm writing a cozier culinary story or like a more hard-boiled story. So I do consciously think about that.
I've read a lot of your stuff, Ashley, and I've read some of it where byline wasn't on it, and I knew I was reading your story. So it's working for you.
That's a good thing, I guess.
So Art or Erica, do you think about branding when you're writing?
I think branding humans generally hasn't been a positive experience for those humans involved. But I'm older than you, Ashley, like a lot probably. And so for me, I'm also have that kind of personality where if I have to do something 2 times in a row, I think, why am I alive? So I don't consciously try to brand myself in any way. I don't like being constrained. I mean, really, honestly, like if anyone or any animal or anything was branded, it meant it was owned by someone else, right? And I feel like writing is one of those very few things in life that we get where we get to own our own agency with it. We get to decide. We get to go against type. We, you know, when someone's like, "Oh, you should do something like you did before," I'm like, that makes me want to throw up in my mouth. So, but it's a personality thing too, right? Like I'm also not that writer who gets up at 4 a.m. every day, or even does it, even eats the same breakfast that's, the same ever. So I think it's an aspect of your personality that leaks into your writing life, whether or not you like to go to this, like, this is my brand, this is my identity, this is who I am, and this is how I write, or if you're like, ooh, gross, that's a horrible way for me to be. And I'm more on that one extreme end. How about you, Art?
Yeah, I like to try different things, and I'm always kind of up for a challenge, whether that challenge is genre related or structure related. I know we're going to talk about structure a little bit later. So I do find my interest going in a lot of different directions, but I also understand it's a balance, and I've become aware of that. Not only because Ed had asked this question, but when I was putting together the most recent collection that I did, I realized that some of the stories were fairly light and some of them were pretty dark. And readers that came to it looking for one aspect of whatever they know about Art Taylor, if they know about me at all, may be surprised at some of the other things. And so there's a balance there between, what do readers expect and how are you delivering things. Now, having said that, one thing that my wife reassures me, she said, whatever you're writing, she said, I think it comes through that it's an Art Taylor story, so to speak, because of, say, the, attention to crafting a character, hopefully, or the way that a ending is a twist, not of plot, but of character. I mean, some of those things can hold it together, even if it's widely divergent in tones. So, yeah, I think like you, Eric, I kind of resist writing the same thing again and again. But I am, am aware of, like, who is the reader out there? Who am I envisioning as a reader? And maybe what reader is right for this story, not for this story. Balancing that.
Yeah, having read your collections, Art, like, I can attest to that. Is, not thinking of Del and Louise, but I'm thinking of The Castle Thief, where you had many different stories that were not necessarily connected. And there was that, like, detail to character. There was that little twist at the end. There was that very, like, cerebral experience with the stories. And then that little gotcha right there at the end, that I saw across many of them. And so I felt that it was, they were all Art Taylor stories, even though they weren't necessarily the same type of story.
Michael, do
Thanks
you think
so much.
about...
And I think, what you're saying as well, and you're talking about kind of theme and setting and this sort of thing. It's like, all right, what is the world that I'm living in? How am I making it? So there's levels of craft, there's levels of subject matter, and I think that all of us are trying to navigate that. Thank you so much. I'll get you to write a blurb for me next time, Ashley. So that's what I need.
Anytime.
Well, you touched a little bit on structure, and story structure isn't a one size fits all. So how do you determine what's appropriate? I know some writers, they sit down and go, I want to write a story that's all in dialogue, and then they try to come up with a story that works. Where other writers, they think this is a story I want to tell, and then they determine the structure they want to use. How about you? Are you lean more one way or the other? Or is it kind of random? Does that make sense? Start with Erica.
Oh gosh. I think for me, I have more a process than coming to it with, like, okay, this is this kind of story, right? Like, and my process is more like do a big vomit, and then see if there's anything in there, and then once I once I get rid of the things that really aren't anything, then I start to see, like, how it works. And some stories, one thing I just love about short stories is they're by nature an experimental form. So you don't have to do the whole Freytag arc for every story. Some stories want that, right? They want the whole pyramid or triangle thing. But a lot of stories, you're just describing a part of the narrative arc. Like some stories really are about the exposition to the inciting incident, and some stories are really about the climax to the denouement, or rounding over that climax or whatever. And it really depends on the topic. It depends on the voice. It depends on the perspective. It depends on what interests you. I recently wrote a story where I just skipped the whole rising action because I found it boring, and I think the reader would have found it boring too, and it's actually kind of worked that way, so structure, I think, has to come from, I really do think the form has to follow the function of the story, but you don't really know that, or I don't know that until I start going. Although there's one story I did write that came from a structure exercise recently, where someone said, write a numbered story that is a chronological. So I was like, okay, that's an interesting challenge. And I liked where that put my brain, because I wrote in a way that I wouldn't have written. And I also wrote about a subject I never would have written about, but that fit. But that's me. I want to hear everybody else.
Ashley?
Oh, okay. So yeah, this question has so much to unpack in it.
Yeah.
So I believe that the story determines the structure. There's so much to think about before you start writing. Is it a serial story? Is it a story that has kind of a precedent with other stories that you've written before? Do you have to write it in a certain tense or with specific beats to fit that series? Like whether the author wants the reader to focus more on like an intimate character experience, or whether the characters come second to the plot, that might determine the tense. Like I know that when I want a more intimate character experience, I tend to write in first person. And so like the story's timeline, like all of these things are things that I would want to think about before I start thinking about the structure. But most of all, I think the biggest consideration has to do with like the purpose or the theme that the author wants to convey. Because if the structure serves a purpose, or it elevates the mood or the theme of the story, then it can really make the story feel more immersive and authentic. So I'm thinking about stories that have unusual structures. I love to read stories with unusual structure. Haven't been so successful in writing them, but I love to read them. So I'm thinking of, Jacqueline Frameworth. She wrote a story that was in the Best American Mystery and Suspense 2023 that had footnotes in it. Like it took place, I don't want to give away too much of it if people haven't read it, but like it takes place in outer space. Like there are footnotes. It reads more like a, like a research. I'm thinking of Lori Rader Day. She had a story called The Applause Dies that read as like a transcript of a speech. And there was one, I cannot remember the author's name, but it won the Derringer a couple of years ago in the Short Mystery Fiction Society. That was almost like acknowledgments at the end of a novel, in which the person confesses to a crime. And none of those stories felt gimmicky. It didn't feel like the structure was the unusual structure was a gimmick. It felt authentic and it felt immersive. And it really helped to create a wonderful reading experience, all three of those authors. And so I applaud them for that, for not making it feel like a gimmick that somebody came up with, but just, that great experience for the reader. Whenever I've attempted this, and I'm not as creative as those other authors, I know that the story and the character has to come to me first, and then figuring out that theme or connection that pulls the story together might help me consider, an alternative structure. The one story that I can think of is one that I wrote a couple years ago. I teach first grade, but I had taught fifth grade for a quarter. Long story, it was during COVID. And we had to teach a lesson on weather fronts. So like occluded, stationary, cold and hot. And the story I wrote was called A Lesson on Fronts, and it had to do with like the story of a disintegrating friendship. But I used each one of those fronts as kind of like a way to tell the story of how this friendship fell apart in the first place. And so, thinking about the story and the characters first, and then just having that unusual structure come after, I think is a great way to make it feel immersive and authentic without making it feel gimmicky. that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with what both Erica and Ashley said in terms of kind of, letting it find its way rather than, prescribing a structure at the beginning. Structure is one of my favorite things to do, and I always kind of find my way through as I'm writing the story. The modular story, the modular form is one that I kind of lean toward, whether it's like different perspectives, just because I'm interested in different perspectives on what's happening, or if it's like, kind of shuttling between past and present. So I do find myself gravitating toward that structure. But I'm also excited, I'm going to echo what Erica said about experimentation and what Ashley said about, and there's a phrase for what that's called, Ashley, which I learned only recently. Maybe other people know this already, but it's from creative nonfiction. It's called a hermit crab structure, where it's like you kind of go in and take over like a hermit crab goes into a shell. And I like that feeling too. There's another story, another acknowledgement story. Martin Edwards did one. Nick Corpon, the Baltimore writer, did one that was parking tickets, as I recall. T.C. Boyle did one that was class notes. But that kind of thing is a fun way to be playful about it. And I think that's particularly good for the short story form. It's harder to do that at novel length, obviously, but at short story, you can be playful like that, and then find that proper matching between, subject and form and function. And I think that's one of the benefits of this size writing, of short fiction generally.
Okay. Well, writing requires concise narrative arcs and requires economy and efficiency at the prose level. So for those of us who haven't written very much or are just beginning, how do we tighten our flabby prose to make it short and sharp? As an example, he closed the door of the car. Why not just say he closed the car door? That's something I see a lot in stories I edit. Y'all have any tips that you would give to writers on how to tighten that language simply?
Michael, I'm gonna tell a story about the story I submitted for the anthology you and Barb edited, Murder Neat. And I didn't think about it until you said that, but I had misread the guidelines, and I thought that I had like 1,000 words more to write than what I had, and I turned it in. And Michael wrote me back within like 4 minutes, and he's like, "All right, this is too long." And I tell my students this story because I was like, "Oh, crap," excuse my language for the recording. I said, I got to take care of this. And I don't know if you remember, Michael, but it only took about 30 minutes. And I went through and I did that very thing where I just started cutting some of these unnecessary, we just going through. And I didn't really change anything major about it, didn't take anything out. It was just like trimming some of those lines and things. And I cut it down by over 500 words and got there. So I always tell my students, and I teach at George Mason University, as we said, and I always talk to my students about, let's take this paragraph. I'll take students, how can we cut this down? How can we trim it? And part of it is the idea of, what is the detail that does all the work? And particularly in short fiction, how can you cut out some of the rest of it? We don't need to describe a living room. You just say living room, but what's the detail that's going to tell us something about the character, or that's going to contribute to the plot? How do you make sure that everything that is on the page is maybe doing 2 or 3 extra things? Lewis Norden, who's a Southern writer I like a lot, said he had to do a reading one time. This is back when he was in grad school. And he said he had to do a reading, but he had only like 5 minutes to read, and his piece was going to take longer than that. And he said he sat at the bar and just started cutting away anything that wasn't interesting. And he said that moment, he's talked about it in essays, he said that moment taught him how to be a writer, because he realized, I'm just going to write the interesting stuff. That may be going too far, but I think we also have to balance, what can the reader bring to this? What do we need to skip? Where can we be efficient, economical? I'm not being efficient and economical now. I'm going to move on to somebody else. Go ahead, Erica, Ashley.
I like to read things aloud, like obsessively. So not just once, but a few times. And I'll notice that I get bored of my own thing. So I'll be reading and even in a sentence, and certainly in larger swaths, where I'll be like, God, this part where I'm just sort of glazed up. And sometimes I'll read to my dog and even she looks bored. And then I'll be like, okay, this is clearly, this part that I thought was important is so not important at all. What happens if I yank it out? or even this part of the sentence. I also like to, I know this sounds weird, but I like to cut jokes because I like being funny. I like making people laugh. And sometimes when I'm joking, it gets jokey, and I'm just cracking jokes and I think I'm so funny and I'm really not that funny. So when I decide to cut the jokes, the actual real humor kind of comes through in stories. And I'm not, really, I guess I think I'm showing off, but it's not actually showing off because I'm not actually funny in those places. So those are some things I do. Sometimes I'll besides the reading aloud, I'll actually read something backwards.
Mm.
It sounds weird, but it's almost like forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards. And that'll help me cut a lot of things. I do a lot of, now this is going to be my diagnosed OCD showing. I'll search on the word the and that to see if I use them too much, especially that. You almost never need to say that. And certain quirks that I know that I have that are incurable, but I can definitely, I know that I have them, so I can go back and fix them later. I tend to over comma. And I'm like, well, if I have to cut these commas, how can I make that sentence shorter? There are a lot of tricks, but I think they really depend on you knowing yourself and knowing your flaws as a writer. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I've done that trick again, where I've done the run-on sentence because I think it's emotional, but it's not emotional. That's just me thinking I have to be fancy here. So I feel like I'm in that phase of writing, in that editing phase. I try to psych myself out and notice my known tricks, and that's how I cut them out and try to stay true to the story itself. Ashley?
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that Art and Erica went first, because I would tell you, my stories have love handles, they have thick thighs, they need some Peloton, they need some Zumba, they need to get in shape. They're definitely flabby. So I have had to do a lot of revisions in the past year, just cutting stuff, and you think I'd be better at it by now, but some things that have helped me. First of all, like Art said, knowing the upper word limit, it's very helpful. It helps me to understand how much I can spread out. I tend to like subplots and connections, so just knowing how much time I have to, how much word economy I have to spread out is very helpful. And writing stories at different lengths, it's a great way to train yourself and how much space you have to let the story rise or spread out. Next, make sure that your dialogue serves a purpose. Characters' reactions and really well-written dialogue can show your reader a whole lot more than your narrative prose can. So like Art said, not describing a living room, but maybe somebody comes in and says, oh my gosh, this room looks like my aunt's, my great aunt's kitchen, or so, whatever, something that shows the reader that it's, it's old and outdated or something. Cut dialogue that doesn't advance your plot, it doesn't drop a clue, or doesn't, inform the reader more about your character. And then finally, this is a big one for me, was considering whether what you, the author, know is something that the reader needs to know. I like to revisit my characters and stories. I just do. It's just my nature. And so this gets to be really tricky for me when I'm writing about a serial character, because there are things I know about my character that make sense in the bigger picture of who this person is, but the reader doesn't need to know it for this story. Yeah. And so just considering whether a reader is coming to this piece of work for the first time, whether they need to know, certain things about the character. If it's a piece of information that lends itself to an important connection or a theme, it's fine. If it's like a fun little detail or a flashback for its own sake, then cut it. And like Erica, my overused words are just. Over and kind of. I didn't realize how much I refer to people. She's over there. Oh, she's over by the counter. I look over the room at so-and-so. That one just, that was like half a page right there. So, just know what your overused words are, and don't be afraid to cut them out.
Another thing to watch for is numerical specificity. For example, I see a lot of writers their character goes into a small restaurant and says there are 3 or 4 tables. Can your character not count? How many are there? Are there 3 or are there 4? Right away, you can cut a couple of words. And I see that a lot where there's no specificity. He was 12 or 13. There were 3 or 4 tables. He said, I'm holding up 4 or 5 fingers. You know, be specific. It will cut words if you use specificity. You touched on this a little bit, Ashley, with dialogue. But how do you create compelling characters when you don't have the expansive canvas of a novel to work with? What telling details, probably dialogue's part of it, do you focus on? Is it looks? Is it actions? Is it quirky habits? What do you focus on to get your compelling characters in the fewest number of words possible?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like the character's voice has to be clear, compelling, and consistent. Even if the character isn't reliable or morally dependable, like morally strong, or it's true whether the story is written in first person or third person. You need those consistent details that lend themselves to the character's nature. How do they justify their own flaws? A big one for me that I love to include is like, what kind of things annoy them? When they're put in extraordinary circumstances, how do they react? Why do they feel compelled to solve a problem? Or, why do they feel drawn to this criminal enterprise that they're in? Little details that give a glimpse into your character's nature are key. I think, if you know who a character is on the page, commit to that fully. If you've established that she's petty at the beginning, then she'd better be petty throughout. If he's like a reformed thug who has like some of his own ways like still built in, make sure to show that he's reformed, but every so often give that reader a glimpse of those old ways so that the narrators know that it's always been there. And then of course, that the genre plays a big part of that. I write a lot of stories that feature amateur sleuths. So they're, non-professionals that find themselves facing a problem that their own particular skill set can solve. So making sure the reader knows why this person is the right one to solve the problem is key. Or even if they're like a private eye, like knowing that they have, why is this person the right person to figure out this crime? Why is this person the right person to solve the problem? So in those kinds of stories, making just a little aside, somehow making sure that the sleuth makes their professionalism apparent, or, letting the reader know this is the right person to solve this problem. That's really important also. Yeah.
Erica?
Ashley, 100% am with you with the voice. That for me, I don't even start a story until I hear, actually, I mean, this isn't like you shouldn't be concerned about this, but like, I do hear a voice. Like, I hear someone say something to me and I'm like, oh, that's, and it might just start with a sentence or a phrase or something that catches my interest. And then I kind of get where they are. And it's almost like following this thin thread to where that voice leads. And I do make this up. I know it's no one's speaking to me, but that is really the basis for my characterization. What they, and like you said, Ashley, like how they justify themselves to themselves and how they see the world. The other part of it for me is what they observe and how they observe it, and how those observations are heavily filtered through their emotional state at the time. So if someone is, in a, angry state, or, they just, a tragedy just happened, murders just happened, or death has just happened, or whatever. And what they notice then, and how that observation is manifested through the specific details that they notice. I think if you really want to understand someone, you try to listen to what they notice. I think that tells more about them than them when they're noticing themselves, even, or making a stance on the world or whatever. I think that's the best way to understand that a character is maybe in love with the person they're describing, or that they're a stranger in town but they like it, or whatever. That's for me, that observational piece is the other part for me.
Okay.
I'd love to hear Art.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump in on Art here. Sorry, Art, because we're going to need to leave some time for questions. So I wanted to make a slight transition because we promised how to write and how to sell, get published. So kind of a multi-part question here, and then we'll start with Art, is when you're writing a new story, are you more likely to write a story and try to find a place to publish it? Or are you conscious of where you're writing for? For example, if you're invited to an anthology, obviously you know the market. But what's your approach? And then how do you find markets? What's your approach to finding markets?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm glad you qualified it with the idea of like an anthology call. A lot of times I'm writing, and Eric, I can imagine you nodding already. You know, you kind of write where it goes, and then you figure out, well, where is going to be a good place for this? Where could this find a home? So that's generally my approach, unless there is like an anthology I'm aiming for, or again, maybe a specific market that I'm like, I'm interested in that, and here's a story I'm writing. I'm gonna kind of craft it with that in mind. One thing in terms of finding places, and I will say that, you know, the community we're in is always a good place to hear about anthology calls, to hear about what's out there, a new market that's coming up, to make those connections. I don't want to use the word networking, but I just did. But the idea of like hearing about things, I think, is good. I encouraged one of my students recently who writes horror, so different genre slightly. And he was like, how do I find a place to go with this? I said, well, you pick up Ellen Datlow's best horror anthology. I said, and you look at what she's reading and where she's picking the stories up from. And usually in the back, there's a honorable mention of best of. So it's not only the ones that are published, but also the ones back there. I said, those tend to be reputable magazines that are getting readership and getting attention. And he turned around, and that was last semester back in the spring. And this fall he comes, he goes, you know, I follow what you said, and they accepted my story. And that's super exciting. And so that's one of the things that I advise people to do. You know, where are publications that are getting noticed, and then look at the call and try to find a place that's going to be good.
I want to interject and say I have a free resource on my website, and I'm going to put the link that has like 500, I think this is it, 500 literary magazines and it's ranked, you know, from the New Yorker to all the way down to, you know, not a magazine you never heard of. And you can just go down the list, really. And again, I don't limit myself to, with regard to any genre. Like if I'm writing whatever genre, I figure I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what they want. So I send to everywhere. That's their job to figure out whether or not they like my thing or whatever. But people can use that. It's, you know, again, it's like a free resource. I need to update it. There is a little genre section at the bottom if you only want to send to genre magazines. But it's really just like every conceivable literary magazine in the world. And you just don't know. You don't know who's going to want it.
Ashley, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's really awesome, Erica. I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah, I've done both. You know, as mentioned, I teach little kids. I have quite a few kids of my own, and so sometimes, like, so my writing time is a little more limited, and so I will search for markets, you know, calls that really speak to me, and try to submit there first. I do have stories that just pop into my head sometimes, and you know, I'll write them, and then just depending on the length, the subgenre, the tone, then I'll think of markets that could be a good fit. I know there are different organizations that I'm a part of, Sisters in Crime and MWA, and also the Short Mystery Fiction Society, that have like databases of good places that you can submit. And so if you're a member of any of those organizations, you know, you can look for resources within them, and you know, help you find places to submit. Great.
Well, as you notice, Katie has come back, and that means it's time for Q&A. What do you got for us, Katie?
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you so much. I wasn't quite sure how to do that transition, so I figured just popping back up was probably going to do it. So we actually had a question in the chat asking more about where you send things. So I feel like Erica and Ashley and Art, you've just addressed a lot of that. So we've shared some of those links and resources. Ashley, as you were saying, and Art too, about the communities that you're a part of being a place to find calls and thinking widely. Erica, your list is amazing.
Thank you.
I also shared the list that MWA has on the website as well, so a good place to check out too. And yeah, so that was great to see that, and I'm just so invigorated by your conversation, and so I hope everyone was taking a whole bunch of notes. I was trying to, but then there was like so much that was going on that was so excellent. So we're turned to questions now, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of the things that I was thinking that sort of came up as themes. Many of you talking about balancing what the reader can bring to the story. Erica talking about asking the what if questions. I also like to picture you reading forwards and backwards to your dog. Ashley, love joy in the stories, and liked your suggestion of thinking about writing stories at different lengths and thinking, as you and Erica talked about your overused words. Many of mine came to mind. And Michael talking about how story structure isn't a one-size-all-fit. So we've got some great questions, and we'll turn to one that Michael, actually, maybe you would be able to address. Bruce was saying we could perhaps address the elephant in the room, or whatever other animal
Great,
we
I'm
want.
the elephant in the room.
No. Which is shrinking markets, thinking about Down and Out books, Mystery Magazine, and the future of Black Cat Weekly, among others. So maybe thinking about what the field looks like at the moment.
Well, one of the important things to realize is the field. Publishing is constantly changing. I've been through transitions like this multiple times. I've had markets disappear out from under me. I watched an entire genre disappear. I used to write for the confession magazines, True Confessions, True Story, etc. And when the last two of those magazines disappeared, the genre disappeared. So what you have to realize is you don't spend all your time worrying about doom and gloom. Go, okay, these markets are gone. What else is out there? And that's market search. One of the things you need to do regularly is learn how to use Google or whatever your search engine is. Search for calls for submission, or calls for submission and crime fiction, calls for submission and mystery. And you will find markets that you and your friends haven't been talking about because you didn't know they existed. I have sold to multiple publications just because I found them doing a Google search. Now, it is frustrating if you're a regular contributor to any of these publications, but you have to be able to move on, shift gears. Maybe all the hard-boiled markets disappear, you start writing some cozies. Or you're a cozy writer and those markets disappear, you start writing hard-boiled. You just have to roll with it.
With 1,300 short stories, I'd imagine you run out of markets long ago.
I've killed a few, yeah.
It's amazing.
We had a question about, speaking of like not word length, but story length. Cheryl had asked about, said, I write 10 case stories with the same heroine. How many of them could be considered a collection? And generally, like thinking about word length for stories. Ashley, I know you're talking about writing at different word lengths, story lengths. What does that look like? Like what kind of is a framework for what a story is and for a collection?
So I tend to be very verbose, and I'm probably the only one here who has not like published a collection yet. So, but I will say that the novel length work that I have coming out is kind of like these 10 case stories that I've kind of connected together to make a, one cohesive whole. So, just to answer your questions, getting back to Michael's numerical specificity, there are 7 stories in there at about 10K words each. And then there's the overarching story that pulls it all together. I can't imagine that, if you have stories that are 10,000 words, that it would be many more than 7 or 8 stories that you would pull together for something like that. But I'm not an editor, so I defer to others with more experience.
I've noticed that collections lately tend to be at least 45,000 words, but not usually as much as, like, Ashley, yours qualifies as a novel, right? So it has that higher limit. And I've noticed that short story collections tend to be shorter, like usually around probably between like 42,000 words and 60,000 words, what I've noticed, sometimes 65, but they don't tend to go as long as novels because people get tired of you. A little bit, but
I'll never get tired of you, Ashley. Just letting you know.
No, but not in a novel. When it's called a novel, they don't get tired. But when it shifts so much as short story collections do, they do tend to skew a little shorter. So to answer your question, as far as how many of those 10K word stories would equal a collection, I'd say at least for probably 5 to 6, probably.
Part of it's going to depend on the publisher, because every publisher has a different range. For example, what is it? Shotgun Honey tends to produce smaller collections, where Down and Out used to produce much longer collections.
Yeah.
So, and Crippen and Lander, yours are fairly lengthy, aren't they, Art?
Yeah.
80, 90? Yeah.
80, 90, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's maybe when you're more established, like you are, you get to do that.
Oh Lord, I don't know about that,
if
but
it's
yeah.
But it doesn't hurt.
First timer, yeah. I think if it's a first timer, they have limited patience with us.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll stick on word length for a moment with a couple of other questions. Michael had asked another Michael here, had asked anybody ever written a story that was too short for minimum word length. You guys talked a lot about cutting out, thinking about what needs to be cut out, but anyone write something that's too short that needed to be padded out? Art, I see you. You've got one to share.
I have a good story, which is interesting about word count. So I was invited to an anthology. It was a Lou Reed anthology. Inspired by. So, and the story, I think it was 5,000 words, and I wrote a story, but it was too long. And I felt like it needed to be too long. I would defend that it was too long. It was like 7,000 words. And went back and forth with the editor. Editor's like, you really needed to cut it down. And I said, I don't think I can be able to do it, but I'll write you another story, to make sure it's not over 5,000 words. So I picked another Lou Reed song, wrote another story. This one was, super short, like 1,500 words. I turned it in. I'm like, I'm well under our maximum here. And he's like, yeah, can you add your 3,500 words to that? And it's like the Procrustean bed, it's like it's too long, they'll cut you off. And if not, they'll stretch you out. And I was like, I don't think this story deserves that much. My point about this is, I think sometimes there may be a different market, and there are a lot of markets out there that are looking for different size stories. So instead of trying to expand your story or shorten a story, if you think it really deserves to be as long as it is, maybe find a different home for it. That said, I think there are possibilities. I've had stories where I felt like there was more that could be developed there. And I mentioned modular stories as well. Let's say, here's one story and let me get a different point of view, and how is this going to expand it out? But I don't think it needs to be expanded just artificially. I'm sorry, I rambled again.
No, I think you said everything I would have ever said.
Yeah, you did not at all. I also feel like we should listen to music with you, Art. Like so much of some of the writing, the pieces you've talked about with musicians sound amazing.
Well, it's Josh Pachter has done a tremendous amount with the music anthologies, but I do find myself listening to music and ideas coming from there, and that's not only in terms of like what the lyrics are, but also thinking about rhythm, thinking about structure. Those things I think can cross and inspire cross forms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll stick on word count for another just last question, and then we'll do 2 final questions, and then I think we'll bring this evening or morning, wherever you are, to a close. But Mark had asked about flash length under 1,000 words. Do you see increasing interest in this? It feels like the market's attention span, clearly my attention to this question got smaller in the middle of reading it, but seemed like the market's attention span is getting smaller. So thoughts about flash work, like where you might be seeing that, if you're seeing more of it?
Online. they love it online because I don't know why it's so difficult for people to scroll, but apparently it is. So if a story is online, they tend to not like a longer story, from what I've seen. But I think Flash is really interesting because I always see like the editor. They look at each issue of their magazine like it's a dinner plate, right? And they'll have their star entree from their star writer, and they'll be like, "Hey, what goes with salmon?" And they'll be like, "Oh, here's some like mid-lister, and oh, we'll have this as a side, and then I have this little space here," and they want a little garnish, and that's where their Flash comes in. So that I think you can fit in really unexpected places in a lot of magazines. I know very few that won't take Flash. But especially online, and there's some places that are entirely dedicated to Flash too online. So, but what do you guys think?
I have never written anything that's that short in my entire life. I've got to get better at it. I'm sorry. So I defer to all of you guys who are more masters at that.
Yeah, I've sold a few stories that were only a few sentences long, but the whole story was there. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Can you read one to us?
Done.
I want to hear one.
I don't have them memorized.
It's only a few sentences. How hard can it be?
And you can go to Mike. I was just resharing everyone's websites in the chat so that you all can, amongst panelists and moderator and attendees today, you can find out more about everyone's work. And pre-order, do everything. These things are happening in the chat right now. Thank you guys very much. And also people talking about stories that they have coming out. We'll just do these one really quick question that came up in the chat, and then 2 questions that maybe are a couple minutes longer. We'll go a couple minutes over our time just because you all have been so fantastic, and I just want to finish up with these questions. So Mark had asked about the heavy use of curse words in the dialogue. Does it limit options for publications? Does language have an impact, or certain language have an impact? Erica, I feel like you're shaking your head, so maybe that could just be the answer, or not.
I think appropriately used curse words are very wonderful. I love swearing. I won't do it here because I'm not sure we're allowed to, but yeah, I don't think it limits. Well, it never has for me, and I use a F ton of swear words, so all the time. So in every conceivable possible scenario, but especially in my writing. So I've never had anyone tell me to stop. Have you guys?
No. I mean, of course, it depends on what kind of story you're writing. You know,
yeah, if it's like Highlights magazine, you're not allowed.
Yeah. Or, you know, there's some people that read books for adults, like they write cozies, and like straight up cozies don't have any cursing in them at all. And I'm just like, adults curse, like it doesn't seem. So I won't call my stories pure cozies just because, you know, people curse. That's the way people speak. But you know, again, just like with any language, you know, you don't want to dump the salt on, you just want to sprinkle it, because it's still art, you know.
I love that, and I think I should keep it in mind for my cooking also, which is as good as well. We can just think about how well it is. But let's end with these 2 questions. Well, and then we'll end with our final question. But Hillary had asked, how important is setting in your short stories? Ashley, do you want to start? I'm just thinking about this.
I'll be that guy.
Thinking about the Virgin Islands.
Setting is really important. It's a character in and of itself. I express my setting through like visuals, through dialect, because I use a lot of island dialect in my stories. You know, through cuisine. It encompasses so much, and when done properly, it can really become, you know, just its own element of the story aside from the plot and character.
Maybe we can end, not end. I keep saying end, and then I'm like, I do have one last question. So, but looking at Chuck's question about the writer-editor relationship and how to nurture it, maybe speaking partly from I just lost my sentence in the middle of it. So speaking partly from the editor side of it and also from the writer side, if you all have thoughts about what it looks like to nurture or, really cement that relationship.
I just want to say, Katie, you're doing really well for this being 2 a.m. where you are.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, you're being very articulate. With regard to short stories and literary magazines, I really prefer the writer-editor relationship to be an affair and not a marriage. I really do move on to other magazines. I feel like, well, been there, done that. I published there. Now I'm going over here. So like there have been very few times. I don't have, again, Michael's problem of 1,300 published stories where you would have to repeat. I have far fewer, but I always feel like I would much rather explore a new place. So I don't tend to submit to the same places over and over, unless, sometimes I do. But so I feel like it's intense, and I really love being edited, and I love hearing, and I really do try on everything they suggest when they suggest something. And then I do also know that there are times when they just want to put their fingerprints on something. So I try to be really cognizant of something that really truly doesn't work. And there are a few battles I will fight, but I'd say 95% of them, if it's like equal either way, or if there's an appreciable difference, which there often is, if they if it's better with their suggestion, of course I'll take their suggestion, and when I feel like it'll make it worse, sometimes I try to address the problem they're addressing and not take their suggestion on how to fix it. I find my own way to fix the problem and address the problem, and then everybody's happy. But that's my way. How about you guys?
One of the things that I think really helps a writer is a level of professionalism. When you submit your work, it's on target, it's the right length, it's not 2,000 over like Art tries to do. It's formatted properly, it's presented well. If you get accepted, you work with the editor. You turn your edits around on time. You turn your page proofs around on time. You deliver what you say you're going to deliver. If you agree to write us, if you're invited to an anthology and you agree to it, you turn your work in on time. You don't wait till the last minute and say, "Oh, I didn't get to it." Writing's an art, but publishing is a business. And for example, I edit a gardening magazine in addition to all the mystery stuff. We don't publish blank pages. So if you miss a deadline, somebody else's work goes in that magazine and you probably don't get invited back. So it's very simple to answer your email, to respond to editors, to work with them. And then in the editing process, be good to work with. Your work is not etched in gold. There is no writer I've ever met who is so good that every single thing is perfect. There are some who come close. But so the thing is, when the editor asks for a change or suggests a change, you look at it, you consider it, you say, "Oh, they're right," or "I see what they're doing, but here's a better way," like Erica mentioned. Or you say, "No, I think I want to hold the line on this one," and you explain why. And just as a random example, I wrote a story for someone, submitted it, and I mentioned that a character was wearing a rep tie, and the editor, female, thought it meant red tie. But no, if you're a man, you should know what a rep tie is. It's a specific kind of tie. And the same thing for another story with, I described the beer window on a pickup truck. If you live in Texas, you know where the beer window is. It's the one that opens and backs. You can throw your empties out when the cops are coming, so there's no open cans in the car with you. But you kind of have to be from there or from here to know those things. And those are things that you say, "Okay, let me explain it so you understand it." And usually they go, "Oh, now I get it. Now I understand. I didn't know that."
Michael, I think I'm always going to think about you when there's non-specificity happening. When someone walks in and it's like, "Oh, there were four 5 tables there. I'm like, no, we actually could just count the tables. So
Yeah.
thank you. I'm gonna, we were speaking about cozies before. Ashley, we were mentioning cozies, and this is all just a save the date for December 17th. We're going to be having an MWAU session about cozies.
Good.
So put that on your calendar. There will be more information and the opportunity to sign up on the website soon. So bookmark that. There was so much wonderful stuff happening in the chat about people connecting about reviews and new stories and things that they've loved. And again, I had shared all of these excellent writer and editors websites in the chat. So please check those out. And I was thinking that you guys could all create an anthology together. Ashley and Art, you can have the really long stories in it. Erica, you can kind of maybe shift up which word count you have. And Michael, you can have your the brief sentences of a complete story as like these takes in between. I think it'd be fabulous. You guys can decide on the title together.
Amazing.
But in lieu of that, we'd love to know what I and everyone else, I'm quite sure, would love to know what you're working on now that you're excited about, that you want to share. Either something you've mentioned or something new that you haven't.
No.
I'll go first.
One moment,
Everybody at once.
did such a good job going from person to person, and now I've completely created a burst of balloon.
Being
Ashley,
polite.
take us away.
I've got a story coming out in Black Cat Weekly next month, right before Thanksgiving. It's a Thanksgiving story, but it's not all that warm and fuzzy. There will be the novel-length work coming out in April.
Nice.
So I'm excited about both of those and a few other things. We'll see.
My work is going. My writing is going very slowly, but I'll hold up a prop. Erica and I both have stories in the new Best American Mystery and Suspense. It comes out on Tuesday. Is that right, Erica? Tuesday.
I haven't gotten my copy yet because it went to the wrong place.
I'll let you look at. There it is. There. So hold on. We'll get it. But yeah, I think it comes out on Tuesday. Erica and I have stories in there, and I mentioned the spy story. That's not till I think it's April, but the anthology is What the World Needs Now. Mysteries inspired by the music of Burt Bacharach, edited by Martin Edwards. My story is The Look of Love. So that's what I got.
That's fantastic.
I'm working on a novel. I have that one. Sorry, I'm looking for the thing to hold up just to promote other people's stuff. I have one in here too. Is this backwards for you guys too?
No, it's good.
Oh, it's good. But it's actually the same one that's in the one that I'm in with you, Art, and working on right now. This is going to take forever, but I'm working on a historical mystery, murder mystery novel. And I've never written historical before, so it's going as you might expect.
What era?
1929.
Oh, very fun.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I mean, no, it's not a fun year, but very fun.
Well, I mean, it depends whether it was, who you were, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Michael?
I've got a story titled Black Velvet that comes out in the anthology Lunatic Fringe later this month. I've also got a story titled 4:13 a.m., which comes out in the Vigilante Crime Pulp Fiction Anthology, which is going to be published later this month.
Ew.
And currently out is stories in Hitchcock and Queen in recent months. So.
Oh, fantastic. Well, this was such a dynamic and vibrant conversation. I'm so thankful to all of you. Michael, thank you for guiding the conversation so smoothly and reaching such a broad range of things. I hope everyone listening took a ton of notes and look up a lot of the publications to which you all can submit as well. And thank you all so much for your time today. This was fabulous. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
to
you,
everybody
Katie.
who
Thank
came.
you, Michael. Did amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Katie.
And all the hosts